today's episode, we talk about how one coach overcame very tough adversity off the field to get back on the field as a player and now teach his players how to overcome adversity. And joining me to discuss that is the offensive line coach at Northwood University, Coach Arthur Ray. Coach, it's great to have you here.
Hey, it's great to be on, man. I thank you for having me.
So, Coach, your story really leading up to coaching starts with you being diagnosed with a rare form of cancer when you were 17 years old.
Yep.
Tell us about that story. I know you shared it with me before we got going, but you were, I know, playing for legendary high school coach Frank Linty at Mount Carmel, and you find out, as you're playing, that you have this rare form of cancer in your shin.
Yeah, so it was a whirlwind, man. The crazy thing is I got hurt around playoff time, and that I had a lump on my shin. That lump on my shin ended up being a bone tumor. I had no idea. So I finished the playoffs and finished the rest of the season. It wasn't until about a week before signing day, actually. Before I was about to sign with Michigan State. I was going up the stairs at Mount Carmel, and my leg was really bothering me. So my dad finally took me in to get it checked out. Of course, I got some X-rays and all of that. Then got the biopsy back, and it was to my surprise bone tumor, bone cancer. What ended up happening after that, I called Coach D'Antonio and the staff at Michigan State immediately. He put his arm around me. He did something that I'm not sure a lot of coaches across the country would have. He kept me on scholarship. I signed my national letter of intent with Michigan State, and then I immediately began chemotherapy that next week. So I went from, accomplishing everything I wanted to accomplish to, on the sixth floor, the pediatric floor of UIC Hospital in Chicago. So it was a whirlwind of emotions, man. I definitely was tough for me.
So you went through a year of chemo, but you were able to find your way back out onto the field and play the game you love.
Yes. Blessed by God, man. It took me 4 years. To come back. I spent 2 of those years on Michigan State's campus on crutches. I was hopping around campus for 2 years. By the grace of God, 2010, the doctors cleared me to walk, so I walked for an entire year. Of course, I'm doing everything as a player. It was like I had 2 redshirt years. I'm lifting, working out. I'm showing up to the meeting room. I'm soaking all of that stuff in. On hindsight, that's what makes me such a good coach now, I guess, just the details. I learned from a coach Rochar, Dan Rochar, offensive line coach for the New Orleans Saints. He's a great mentor for me. He was my coach at Michigan State, but even bigger than that, as the doctor was going through my chemotherapy plan for the future, Coach Rochar, he stood right there in the hospital with me. So we got a very strong relationship. But 2011, I got cleared finally. Walked back on the field for spring ball, participated in probably 10 practices of the 15, and I was back, man. I was back. I played in 3 games that year. I started against Youngstown State because my guy Joel Foreman, who was he had the Michigan State starts record. He gave up his spot so I could play, and me and him were good friends. If I had came to Michigan State on time, he would have been my roommate. So a lot of good times. It was definitely a rough and long journey. The fun fact that a lot of people don't know is from 2007 to 2009, I went through 9 surgeries. So that was the biggest thing. I went through 9 surgeries. I was back and forth from East Lansing to Chicago. I had a complication from this surgery and that. So it was a lot of adversity, a lot of mental turmoil, man. But we got through it.
But that wasn't the end of football for you. You were able to get back out on the field and play, and even made it to the league for a little while.
Yep, definitely. So you're right, Dad. After I played in 2011 at Michigan State, I got my degree in 2012. Got my degree in communications, and I transferred to a small school in the middle of the mountains, Durango, Colorado, Fort Lewis College. It was a new breath of fresh air for me. I was feeling healthy. I had a year of playing under my belt, at state and practicing. So my body was getting back to that state. And, I went down there to Fort Lewis, and I got voted a team captain by my peers. And I had 2 great seasons out there. I was ended up my senior year. I was Division II All-American. And, I made the All-RMAC team that year as well. And, that's when I first realized that, maybe my dreams of playing at the highest level could still come true. So I ultimately ended up signing an undrafted free agent contract with the Miami Dolphins for Coach Philbin in 2015. And I stayed down there for a year, and then I got cut. And then 2016, I found myself, I was in my parents' basement in Chicago trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And, what's funny, Dan Rochar, he had told me 2 years prior, he said, I think you should go GA and be a coach. And me, I'm stubborn, and I worked so hard. I was trying to get back to becoming myself as a player, but he always knew I'd become a coach, and that's ultimately what I did in 2016.
So you had some great people along the way. You mentioned Coach D'Antonio, you mentioned Coach Rochard, you mentioned Joe Philbin, all great offensive line coaches too along the way. So now that's your career path. You're an offensive line coach, and looking back on all those lessons, I mean, certainly we talked about the adversity you faced as a player, what things that those guys taught you and those mentors along the way, even going back to Coach Lenti, are things that became part of your coaching philosophy now.
That's perfect. I learned something different from all those guys. Coach Lenti taught me toughness. He taught me that some things in life aren't going to be fair, but that don't mean you need to fold. I learned a lot of life lessons at Mount Carmel that I think that even sometimes I don't think I was ready for it at that age, but I noticed that my dad had always told me about sports being very subjective, and he used to always say sports is subjective. It's based on another man's opinion. So he always just told me to continue to put my head down and how hard I had to work and everything, and that just got put on times 30 once I met Coach Frank. So my time at Mount Carmel was good, and I feel like I found my aggression level on the field. Once I got to Michigan State, Coach Rochard is a true teacher, true technician, so detail oriented. I think that you could tell he's my mentor when I watch film with my guys, because I just remember sitting in the film room with Coach Rochard. We must have watched it play 8 times, and he kept rewinding it, going over the steps, and this is after we had a positive play, or after we had a good game. Coach Rochard is so detail oriented. I remember him game planning. He was game planning Penn State, and he brought up a blitz that they hadn't ran in 2 years. But he said, "Hey guys, this defensive coordinator, he ran this blitz 2 years ago. So hey, we got to prepare for it." And I'm sitting in the back, a young wide-eyed freshman, like, what? It's just he taught me how to focus in on everything and how important the little meticulous details were. Coach D was stern, man. He's a great leader, great man. He told me one thing. Coach D came to see me a day after my surgery ended, and he said, Arthur, once you step up, once you stand up and get through this, you're gonna be so above the BS, you're gonna be a leader. He always told me that I'd be a leader of men, and that I would once I finished up going through everything with my cancer, that I'd have a new outlook on life. And he never lied with that. I feel like I see life different than most people. And, I definitely thank him for that. He's a good friend and mentor as well. Coach Philbin, he reminded me, he's an offensive line coach to the core. There's a lot of jokes with him. And he reminded me a lot of Rochard. Offensive line coaches are sort of one and the same now. He was stern, but he was detail oriented. Just focused on. He never let us slip up on the little things, especially during that year.
Well, extending that forward, and now you're a coach at the college level at Northwood, and for you told me it's important that the mental side is coached. And, mental, I mean, you went through a lot physically there. You talked about 9 surgeries, but, right. You don't get through that. and ultimately end up doing what you did, as you said, being a D2 All-American and being able to make it to the league, for a little while there, without being tough mentally as well. And you emphasize to your players something very important to you, that it's about the mental side of the game. You mentioned to me that you kind of harp on that more than anything in coaching them up on the mental side of the game. Talk to us about exactly the things that are important to you there.
Man, it's just number one, what offensive line play is mentality. You got to have pride. You got to you gotta love the grit and the grind of what it takes to be an offensive lineman. That's something day one in terms of coaching philosophy that I like to share in my room. You gotta want to put your hand in the dirt and bang, play in and play out, and and physically move a man from point A to point B, and different things like that. That's the beginning phases of it. But then what I talked about with my guys, I say everybody tells you to work hard, and they prepare you for the success. But what happens with the failure? Most guys don't get prepared for the failure and how to recover from it. Other than offensive line is a position of repetition. It's a position of details, and it's a position of failure. The good ones weren't good at one point in time. They had to work, and fail until they were good. So I always harp on, the different times in my journey. Like I tell my guys, I say, guys, I was on crutches for 2 years. Everybody told me to quit, including the doctors. People in my family are like, are you really going to come back? Are you really going to play? I never didn't see myself not playing this game again, So I talk to them about visualization. I talk to them about playing the game before it happens. See yourself completing that step on that power. If you're a guard on that deuce block, I got to get that trigger step, pick it up, put it down, get that second step down. We're going to double team that guy to the linebacker. My tackle, my aiming point is that hip. I hit that hip, I'm moving anybody. You know what I'm saying? It's just I teach them to visualize those things. But then more importantly, it's after we have a good drive or a bad drive, not getting too high or too low. I train them guys to be neutral. I tell them that, I always saw who I wanted to become. So I challenge them to do that as players. You always got to see the player that you want to become, and you got to mimic the daily habits of what that player looks like. If you want to become an All-American, that you got to be correct with those steps. You got to be diligent in the film study. You got to do things the correct way. So, I talk to them a lot about that. And then really the biggest thing is overcoming the failures and not getting so low with them. A lot of time the guys, you got to think about it. Most time you hear offensive lineman name is holding calls, you're giving up sacks is really for the negative. So training those guys to overcome that, training those guys, hey, the defense had a better series than us. They sent the blitz, it got through, it worked. Maybe we saw it all week. Maybe it was something new. You know what I'm saying? Just being able to overcome that. And then how football is a lot like life. When different things come in the mix and it sort of comes and it's unplanned, it's how you respond is going to dictate the type of person you are, type of man you are.
Coach, when you look at what you're doing in your room, you mentioned to me that the confidence is such an important part.
Yep.
And in order to do that, you said to me that, you make it so that failure isn't necessarily the worst thing. Talk to us about how you build that confidence in your players and have a room where they're comfortable, even when they make mistakes, that they understand they're learning. Talk to us about how you do that.
Well, I think I give them everything. I give them all the answers to the test so that now when they get out there, and I think that's more of me. That's me knowing that, hey, I always tell them, guys, I can't play on Saturday. I'd love to. I'd love to run out there and buckle it up with you guys one more time, but I can't play. So I'm going to give you all the answers to the test so that when something happens, you can solve it for yourself. I instill that confidence in them by working harder on my end, on the back end, to make sure that they got all the information that they need. And another thing is, as we know, every offensive line coach is, you got to be detail oriented. But the biggest thing I learned up here at Northwood is as technical as I was, because all of the guys said it. They said, "Man, coach, you you such a stickler on technique. You harping on my technique. You grading every step. Even if I block the guy, I say, yeah, because I'm preparing you before the elite of elite. I want you to be able to block that, to block this guy in the GLIAC. And if, if Nick Saban in Alabama rolled in town, hey, it's the same step, baby. Same step, same mindset. We coming off the ball hard, fast, physical, and nothing changes. So it's just the mental repetition, the physical repetition that is offensive line play, the meticulousness. And then when they don't do it right, I'm not burying them. I'm on them though. It's definitely a standard in the room that I'm gonna be on them. Like I say, coach them hard, love them hard, but at the same time, I don't create a space where failing is the absolute worst or the guys can't grow from it. Because I know, we like I said, you watch tape of a good player. It was a point in his time as a player that it didn't look like that, but he kept working. He stayed diligent. He stayed focused in, locked in. We normally, especially with my young guys, because they're swimming anyway. They're a college football player for the first time. They don't really know what it's like. I give them one thing to focus on. And even some of my older guys that the guys that have success, I challenge them. I challenge them to master it, to get to a point where they can teach it, to get to a point where I can give them even more. And then my young guys, we focus on one thing a day. I need your hands better today. That's why I tell my young guy Cody from Georgia, I need that footwork better today. My guy Griff from the middle of Michigan. You know what I'm saying? So it's just we pick little things to focus on, and I create a space where, hey, you fail, it's all right, man. Coach gonna be there to pick you back up. But hey, we gonna get it right, and we got the mindset of, hey, I ain't get off crutches when I wanted to. I ain't quit. And then when I finally did get off crutches, I wasn't moving like the old Arthur Ray that I knew. But, but consistent daily work and consistent daily focus, I finally got back there. So that's what I try to create, that type of environment for my guys.
So, Coach, in emphasizing the attention to detail, some of that starts with you in being very detail-oriented and about how you're going to train these guys. And with the equipment you train them with. And you and I were talking a little bit before we got going about this exact idea. And tell us exactly your philosophy on training and the things that you like to use as far as the equipment you're training these guys with.
Yeah, well, see, with just my whole philosophy on training, everything offensive line play-wise, I want to do realistic movement, realistic drills. I'm not just going to, do something that because I think it looks cool. I played the position, got a lot of love and respect, and I was around a lot of great coaches. So everything I do, I want it to translate. I literally want someone who, okay, I can see your lineman doing that movement or going through that drill or different things like that. In terms of the equipment, I'm a big component for med balls. I like med balls, so smaller target, smaller surface. The guys got to focus their eyes more on hitting that smaller target, and it's just a lot more realistic to me. In terms of that, the shields, hand shields, some of the hand shields are just way too wide, because as O-line coaches, we teach our guys tight elbows, keeping your hands inside and, minimizing holding penalties. We don't want guys to grab and different things like that. So you got to train them that way, so that's why I like the slam balls or the med balls, as people will call them, just those that's more realistic. It's more realistic to the body type and the size of the target that we would hit with, going against the defensive lineman, I think. And it goes hand in hand with everything I'm teaching. So now if a guy's hand isn't hitting the med ball, now what's wrong. I feel like a guy can, his hands can miss by a mile, but he's still going to hit that shield. So, that's just not realistic to me. And I think that offensive line is too much of a position of habit. So meaning that, the guys, if you get them hitting those wide shields, then you can't be upset if they're grabbing guys or not hitting inside underneath the shoulder pads where you want them to once the game, because you got to look at how you train them. So that's the correlation I always use, and that's why I'm a firm believer in utilizing med balls.
Yeah, the wide, flat shields make for wide hands if you train it over and over. And it's one of those things I told you at the Division III level, you don't have equipment on in the spring.
Right.
You have those shields, and I ran into the same issues too. At one school, we we did exactly as you did. We utilized the med balls and the padded med balls, right? So they're
Right.
easier on the hands. Those hard ones aren't so good, but the bigger padded med balls. And then the other thing I mentioned to you when I only had those flat shields, we didn't have med balls, is I went to the equipment manager, and our players couldn't wear shoulder pads, but those shields could. So we strapped the shield up with shoulder pads and at least got some of that surface that was more realistic. But ultimately, it is about that realistic part of it too. And I think you've emphasized the use of the eyes. So talk to us about how, the med balls and then the eyes kind of work together with how you start to train these guys on the specific details of their different techniques.
Oh yeah, I think like I had mentioned to you before, I think eyes are the most undertrained part of striking, especially when it either comes to run or pass, especially in pass, especially because you got guys, different coaches focus on independent hands, or for the tackles who want to strike that outside pec or that outside number, that outside shoulder, and then with my inside hand I want to strike the bicep area. So it's like, okay, what cues are you using and what tools are you using to train that? Actually, and that's where the med ball, I think, has been real crucial for me. I use it when focusing on, because center's my favorite spot. It's a spot that I played. I played all five throughout my career, but I think center is my favorite spot. So I like utilizing, when we work in offhand work, putting that med ball like right over that offhand. So now I'm getting my centers used to, they seeing, and I compare it to, I said, all this med ball this is that big 330-pound nose guard that's breathing hard, that's ready to run through you to sack the quarterback. And I just think about, I talk to them about, I give them cues, and the med ball being as small as it is, it gives them a set target. It almost like training your guys for striking as if they're boxers. That's what I equate it to, especially on the pass protection stuff and when I work independent hands. Like, I really, really, truly believe in that, especially if I got my tackle and we work and striking that upfield shoulder, we put the med ball on that upfield shoulder and we walk. So now we marry the feet with the hands. You're getting that hand-feet harmony, as I say, with the coordination and everything. And then we go to the inside. And then just being able to train those eyes, train those targets, because especially with punch timing and everything, a lot of guys, they don't hit where they're supposed to because they don't see it. So I think that's a big deal, in terms of working with striking and having that eye control.
Coach, I know the other thing you like to focus on, especially when it comes to pass protection, is the posture, right?
Yep.
There definitely are things you have to coach up and put your
Yep.
guys in the right position, or they're losing right from the get-go. Talk to us about the things that you like to teach as far as posture, especially when it comes to pass protection.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, I utilize the med ball there, and really it's just a guide when I do my posture drills for my guys. It's all about, especially when we're speaking more so about pass pro, just being in proper posture, being able to sit down, not being a waist bender, not having our chest leaning over ourselves, because we're going to be leaners when we punch, being able to sit down, chest sticking out. We got a nice arch in our back, and then, we can move freely with our feet without leaning and without overextending on our punch. So the posture side of it is huge, and it works. I'll give you an example. When, the offensive lineman has to transition, you really see the posture when a guy punches and when he has to transition. And that's when you sort of can range, is a guy athletic enough? Is he athletic enough to maintain that pad level, that knee bend while he's moving? And, is he patient enough with his punch, where every time he punch, he isn't overextended, he isn't a waist bender, as the old school coaches would call him, right? So, it's just the different things that we like to focus on with the med balls. I put the med ball in the middle of our guy, have them put that down hand on the top of it, and that opposite hand is up so we can strike. And then I really work posture on that. And then another thing that we add to it is we work the stabilization. Everybody works the sets, but when you stop, what do you train your guys? And when your guys do stop setting, or they stop moving their feet, are they in good position to be able to stop a bull rush or to stop a fast push-pull? Just different things like that. Those are the different techniques that I harp on our guys, and how posture plays a main focus when we talk about pass protection.
What are the keys for you in coaching up how to stop the bull rush?
Oh, now that's a good one because I know coaches teach this differently. Really, like I had mentioned earlier, I'm a big proponent of the anchoring down, rolling those hips underneath you. And it makes sense to me just because, you get a guy rushing you directly on head on center and that weight's going through you. You anchor down, roll your hips underneath you. Now that weight's all going up. It's very similar. It's actually the exact thing as our guy, I know your guy, Scott Peters. I first saw that, when he did it at the AFCA 2 years ago, but I always liked that better as a player than the hop, sit technique. When I hopped, I just felt like my feet were off the ground and I didn't feel in control, especially when you're going against a big, heavy, strong guy. He already leaning on you. You got to be able to stop that pressure that's on you now. So I just feel like anchoring yourself, that's a huge proponent on that. I work that because that activates offensive linemen's core. I talk to my guys a lot about core strength, working in the off season on that core. You just got to stop that bull rush in the weight room. It ain't just technique because we go against some freaks, especially on that defensive line. So, that's one big proponent for me that I teach with the bull. It's more anchoring than the hop technique or, the other things that I know some coaches teach.
Coach, I have to ask you, what's your favorite run scheme to teach? And when you take a look at all things being equal, this is really what I like the most, and I feel like we can start to dominate an opponent with this particular scheme. What is that for you?
Oh man, as a player, it was power, and I like teaching. I love teaching power now as a coach. It just gives you like a old school feel when in that gap family, teaching that deuce block, the deuce, the ace of the tray, and little Coach Rochar lingo, but I enjoyed that a lot, especially when I was a player. Now as a coach, I like mastering the zone game, whether it's inside or outside, because of the different packages the defenses try to throw at you. And I feel like zone ball is true offensive line play and what it stands for. Because the zone game, you got to trust each other. I gotta trust that my guard's coming with me. I gotta trust my tackles working with me. My feet gotta be underneath me. Hey, if the knee goes the way, I gotta ricochet back to work vertical. So I love how some coaches, the zone game can seem so simple to teach, but how complicated it gets once the defense starts moving. So right now that was a huge component for me. Wanted me to be honest. My first year at Northwood last year. We played school in Detroit, Wayne State, and they did a lot of movement. They moved a lot, man. Their defensive line was undersized. They moved a lot, and I probably had this phase as every coach has. I'm on the sideline like, what am I doing? Like, right? I'm sitting there like, man, I suck as a coach. I called some guys. I was like, man, how are you handling the movement? When it comes to inside outside zone, and it's crazy because. I told my guys to slow down, play with their feet more underneath them, and everything like that. And it's crazy how once I stepped away. I didn't assume or think that I knew everything. I was willing to learn new things and take a new perspective, and it helped our guys out. But which is crazy because any coach in America, they feel like they can draw inside and outside zone up. But once the defense gets to moving and guys ended up in gaps and your offensive line is a little too fast through or a little too slow or he's dragging that backside leg, it really can change the whole entire play. So just the intricacies, the inside zone, outside zone, love teaching that, and the trust you got to have in your brother that you're playing next to, man. So that's probably what I enjoy the most, probably the play and the scheme I enjoy the most installing now.
So, Coach, the movement part, I agree with you. That's always the toughest thing. The teams that move are going to be the most challenging ones for you. And you mentioned a very good coaching point there to be able to slow things down a little bit for your guys. How do you balance that with still getting them to play aggressive? And I think part of it is it's almost like you coach the running back up, right? Like slow to the aim point and then accelerate through. So how do you coach that up for the offensive line?
Oh, with my guys, it's more so it's you slowing you. I don't want to. If we're preparing for a team that moves a lot, I don't want to be so aggressive where I'm overly aggressive, where I miss the twist, where I miss the stunt. I want to take my steps but keep my feet underneath me. So that way I still have them playing aggressively, but so we're not playing passive where we're getting hit in the chest on the movement. We can still attack it, but I'm like, okay, I know the movement's gonna come. I know it's gonna come. Bang! Now I can hit them in the mouth. So really, it was just with us. I just told my guys, because what will happen was, say we run an inside zone and I'm running it to that. We're running it to the 3 technique. So my backside tackle, he got that 2-eye or that shade on his side, so he's taking off, to get to that backside inside linebacker on that, not knowing that it's an ET right in front of him. You know what I'm saying? So it's just teaching those guys to slow down, play with their eyes, especially when we're going against a team with movement, and that, hey, if you guys trust each other and you stay on your track, we will pick all of this up and we go dance on the sideline once we're in the end zone.
Coach, I know you've put some of this together, especially with the med balls. I was able to take a look at your course on CoachTube, and some really good stuff there. But I guess just walk us through what's available for coaches on that course you put together on using med balls for offensive linemen.
Oh, perfect. What's available is a multitude of different drills with utilizing a med ball that can take your offensive line to the next level. It trains all those things that we talked about. It focuses on the posture. I go over the posture series, then I go over the strike series, the different strikes for your guys that work in that offhand movement when you're a center, as well as working the anchor step with it, working those independent hands when you're a tackle. The independent hands, especially if you like that for your guards as well, just to give you a couple different drills. And then I give you some live one-on-one reps of me taking those drills to the field. Like I said, everything I do and, everything that I hopefully the other coaches across the nation are doing, just make sure it translates, fellas. Just the biggest thing with that, just don't do a drill because it might look good or this guy at the highest level is doing it. If you don't believe in it, it's probably not going to work. So, the biggest thing on that, real practical drills, they're real simple. And, it'll give you a nice outlet, especially to work in the little things with your guys.
And I'll put the link to that in our show notes for our listeners. Again, your show notes, you can find them either in your podcast app in the description of the episode or go to coachingcoordinator.com. Coach, for our listeners out there, what areas do you recruit?
Oh, I recruit the Chicago area, and I've recruited parts of Ohio, and I'm really the main guy for our out-of-state players because I'm the recruiting coordinator here at Northwood. So a lot of the Florida guys, Atlanta, most of the out-of-state guys come through me first in terms of that. But my primary recruiting area is Chicago. Then that going down 94, that Southwest Michigan area. It's about it.
Coach, the final question for you, looking at all the things you do as a coach, what's the one thing you do that you feel gives your guys the winning edge?
Oh, the one thing that I do that gives my guys the winning edge, I think it's just that mentality, man, that mental. My guys walk into each and every game knowing that regardless of what happens, the standard is the standard. Whether we up by 70 or we down by 70, the standard is the standard. I say that a lot in our meetings. I actually, because we had a tough season up here at Northwood last year, so the challenge for me was keeping our guys engaged, keeping our guys that want to play for each other and wanting to play at a high level. That was the challenge for me, and that was my way of keeping that. I always ask our guys to focus on where you want to be and not necessarily where you are. And if you are at the place you want to be, what's the next level after that? Continuously putting goals in front of them and continuously challenging them mentally to overcome all the odds in front of them. That's where I think that our guys excel the most.
Coach, what's the best way for our listeners to contact you?
Oh, guys can contact me on via Twitter. They can follow me at Coach LA73. Send me questions. I'm always participating on Twitter. Of course, it's a huge recruiting tool, but I love the aspect of connecting with coaches, talking ball as well, like my guys over there at Hog Football Chat.
Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time. It was great to hear your story here on the podcast and get into some of the details of what you do. And best of luck to you and Northwood here in 2021.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, head over to iTunes or Spotify and click 5-star for a rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It really helps the podcast. Check out our new home for the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. That's at coachandcoordinator.com. And follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.